Welcome to In Her Image, a podcast where we seek and celebrate the Mother God through scripture, theology, myth, and everyday life. I am your podcast host, Meg Ritmanick, and today we are continuing the third part of our four-part series with Pam England. Hi, Pam. How are you?
Hi, Meg. I'm great. Nice to be with you again.
I'm so excited to hear this beautiful rendition of Inanna's transfiguration and her ascension out of the underworld. So, thank you so much for coming and being with us today and sharing this beautiful story. Last time we left off with the story of Inanna hanging on the hook of the underworld, which is just a great cliffhanger.
It is a great cliffhanger. And for many years, when I was first learning this story, like for many people, it is so disturbing. You want to go past this because it seems so horrific. And some people, when they're learning the story, they don't want to tell this part to others as storytellers, but it's a part that can't be left out because it is like the turning point in the story. When Inanna is hanging on the hook, she is in a process of dissolution. And dissolution means that not only is her body decaying, going through the process of death, but her whole being is. And when all of us have a psychic death, a shock through one of our rites of passage, we too go through this. In our culture, we have an orientation towards the light, towards positivity, towards transformation, without the little death, without the dissolution, the dismemberment. So this story is powerful because you're forced to confront that this is part of the journey. And there she is hanging on the hook. But one of the things about a warrior archetype is that before she went to the underworld, she anticipated she would reach this place from which she could not return on her own power. And so one of the characteristics of the warrior archetype is to prepare for your return. Like an innocent archetype or magical thinking or a child archetype would just want to dash into the adventure and trust that everything's going to be perfect and powerful and empowering and not think about the place of little death, dissolution, dismemberment, and needing help to return. But Inanna knew because she was a wise woman already and a priestess. And this is an incredibly important part of the story as a teaching to us. So instead of having pride in her priestess status or her warrior status, she began only with wisdom but humility. And so she asked her maidservant, Ninshibur, before she left to watch for her return. Inanna gave very clear instructions to Ninshibur. And she said, if I do not return in 3 days and 3 nights, and 3 is a significant number in numerology, meaning past, present, and future. So she comprehends the whole journey and not just dashing into the adventure again. So she says, if I do not return in 3 days and 3 nights, I entrust you to go to the 3 fathers. And you are to tell them, I have not returned, tell them what has happened, and ask them to help bring me back. Do not leave me in the underworld. Do not allow me to be returned in a box. Do not let my bones dissolve in the underworld. Make sure you help bring me back. And Ninjabur loves her and promises to do this. And so she watches the sun and the moon. And when the 3rd day passes, she puts on her sackcloth of grief. And she beats her drum. And she calls Inanna's name. And she walks around Sumer calling Inanna's name. You can imagine this, Inanna. And in my mind, I feel, having been in the underworld, it's almost like hearing someone out there, even though you can't see them and you think they can't hear you. So it's like you're in a distance, you can hear someone calling your name, calling you back so that you don't get too entranced by the underworld, too absorbed by it. And although Inanna can't call back because she's dissolved, she's dying, she can't get herself off the hook. There's still this connection to someone who loves her above calling her back. If you've ever been in a place like in a great postpartum depression or in any other state of great despair where you feel so alone, you're sure no one can understand and you're afraid you've really been abandoned or you're taking too long to get back, the thought that someone is calling your name somewhere, it's very heartening. And so Ninshibur, she goes to the first father and she tells him the story of what's happened to Inanna, why she went to the underworld, how she hasn't come back, how she's afraid that she won't come back, except maybe in a box. And she begs for help, and he essentially says, what a lot of us say is, well, it's her own fault. She chose to do this. She knew better. She knew that nobody who went to the underworld returns unchanged or unscathed. I'm not going to help her. And so she leaves and she goes to the second father and she says, Inanna has gone to the underworld. And she has not returned. I'm afraid she'll come back in a box. A box of bones, please help us. And this one says, oh, that Inanna, she always wants more power. She took all the maize, put them in her boat of heaven and took them. She always wants more power. I won't help her. Let her pay this price. It's sort of like what we say about people who have trouble in birth or trouble in life. They should have studied more. They should have chose more wisely. They should have done something different. We create a cause and effect to kind of wash our hands of them. So it's not unusual that this would happen in this story. In fact, it's quite the mirror of humanity, isn't it? But she goes to the third father, Enki, who is her actual father, and she says, Father Enki, Inanna has gone to the underworld, from which no one returns unchanged, if at all. She's not returned in 3 days, and I fear she won't return. Will you help? And he says, oh, my daughter. What has my daughter done? And he wants to know more. And while she's telling him the story of what's happened, he's cleaning his nails like this. You see? And she says, why are you cleaning your nails at a time like this? And he says, you don't understand. I, unlike the other two fathers, have been to the underworld and returned. I clawed my way out. I know my way. This is the dirt of the way. And then he blew on the dirt of his right hand and blew on the dirt from the nails of his left hand. And he created two little allies called the Krugara and the Galator. They were invisible spirits. Some call them allies, some call them little gods, depending on the version you read, but we'll call them allies. And he gives them each instructions about what will happen when they go to the underworld, going through the gates, to bypass Bidu, to slip through the cracks, to go quietly down, and that he will meet Ereshkigal on the floor of the underworld, writhing like a woman in labor. And they are to go up to her and say, oh, your aching heart, your broken heart, with empathy. And she will cry out, oh, my liver aches so much. And they are to say, oh, your liver, the pain is so deep. Oh, my back. Oh, my back, it hurts so much. And you are to say, oh, your back, it's breaking in pain. And with this empathy, which she's never received in the underworld, she will offer you the food of the underworld. Do not eat or drink it, or you shall never come back. You know, those who eat the food or drink the water of the underworld in all mythology become part of the underworld. So it's always forbidden. And then Enki says to these two little invisible beings, she will offer you the rivers. And you must say, no, we do not want the rivers. She will offer you the fields of grain, which were part of the myth of Inanna, is that they developed agriculture at the time. So there was fields of grain. And you must say, no, we do not wish the fields of grain. And she will say, what do you wish? And you must say, the corpse of Inanna, the body of Inanna. And then you must give her the water of life and the food of life. And he gave to each one, the Kugara one, the water of life, the Kukalator, the food of life. And you must restore Inanna and let her ascend. And so these little allies, you can imagine their little voices saying, we will do it, we will do it. And they fly off and they pass unseen. They pass unseen by Biju. And they find Ereshkigal on the floor, writhing like a woman in labor with her hair looking like wild dried leeks. Her breasts are naked and she's just covered in mud and just suffering so much. And they give her the empathy. She offers them the gifts of the underworld, just as they were told that she would. And they ask for the body of Inanna. And she says, you may have it. So they fly up and they have the power to lift her up off the hook and lie her down on the floor. And they give her little drops of the water of life and the food of life. And one of the things that in alchemy I've learned is the water of life is not physical water. It is alchemical water, which is a spiritual water that purifies. It washes and washes and washes. So in alchemy, when Inanna dies, her body literally turns black. It rots. It turns green and black. It's dripping. It's in the rotting phase of falling apart, which is psychically what happens to us spiritually when we go through a transformation. And then we have to wash and wash and wash, not 3 times, not 9 times, maybe 100 times. Keep washing and washing, washing with the rain, the waterfalls, washing in the river. All kinds of stories and metaphors and images can come to mind. Here it's the water of life. She drinks it. Drops, just little drops go into her, but it's washing her. So she goes from being the black of first stage of alchemy to the white. You know, she's purified. Or you could think of it as getting the wine, like the blood of Christ, you know, the wine, to take in the wine. And grapes are also another symbol of alchemy. You know, you take a grape and you crush it like Inanna was crushed. And it literally has to rot and dissolve to turn itself into wine. It goes through a whole transformation of alchemy to become wine. And so she could drink the wine as a symbol of that transformation. And when she is restored, she is not the same Inanna that began the journey. It isn't like she's restored to her former self. She's now reborn into her new self. Inanna is then restored. In the myth, which was written in clay, if you read the original, if you will, transcription, it sounds very quick and very instantaneous. But after I experienced it postpartum, I realized that when you're writing in clay, you can't write pages and pages to explain the depth and the length and the complications that occur during this return. It's very labyrinthine and it does take time. And before we move on, I just want to contemplate that Inanna, even though she's the queen of heaven and earth, the priestess of 7 temples, this great warrior, she doesn't give herself the water of life and the food of life. And she knew she wouldn't. Someone has to, with love, has to ask someone to send it. Something like an ancestor or an angel or some mystical force provides it to us. I just want to stress again to be receptive to this other level of help during a transformation rather than just intention and I'm blaming yourself for taking so long or not knowing what you're doing, but to allow yourself to go through it, not knowing what you're doing, not knowing where you are. That's the thing about these journeys, when we look at them on paper, it seems like this happens first and then this happens and then this happens. And this is what I should do. And it's not like that. Most of the time on this journey, going down and coming back, you don't know where you are. I didn't know where I was or how it happened until after I finished. And then I looked back and then I realized what had happened and how the journey looked. But when I was in it, I was lost the whole time. I hope that's helpful. There are some images that from Sumer that were sculpted or like reliefs in clay from like 4,000, 5,000 years ago. And the imagery is interesting to me. You see Inanna coming up from the underworld and she's naked and she has the wings, like a physical transfiguration of her body from being just human into having these features of the owl. Well, the owl in Sumer didn't mean wisdom like we often think of it nowadays. It meant death and death and rebirth. So because Inanna died in the underworld, nobody went to the underworld and came back. If you went to the underworld, you stayed, you died. And Inanna defied this, though. She said, I want to put my toe into the underworld so that I too can have the power of the underworld. Part of the purpose of an initiation or a heroic journey is to become bigger, not to become better, to be more complete, not to be more powerful. Has nothing to do with empowerment. Has to do with becoming whole, becoming the person you were meant to be. And because our ego is so strong and the rules are so strong, without a crisis or being taken to the underworld, dropped to our knees, hung on the hook, we're not going to let it happen. But this dissolving and the being washed with the alchemical water and being reborn allows us to do it. All of the beings in the underworld are covered with feathers. So the wings represent when she's been transformed, she has the wings of the owl, the wings of death, of rebirth, and the talons of the owl. And then she's standing on the back of these two lions. They're white and black lions. And she always has lions around her. They're sitting next to her. She's standing on them. It's a symbol, I think, of her becoming one with something so fierce and so the wildness. And because she was a priestess, I imagine she went back to her temples even more wise and more compassionate than she was before she went down. At any rate, so now she's been revived, which is the first stage physically, and she's been kind of revived. And now the rest of the transformation takes place on the ascent. So what happens in this myth is there's the 7 gates going down, and then there's the 7 gates going up. So at each of the gates going up, just as in each of the gates going down, she had to give up one of her maze, one of her symbols of power, her symbols of self-identification, her attachment, her ideas, whatever that represented. On the way back, she has to do a couple of tasks at each of the gates. She has to leave in the underworld what belongs to the underworld and not start to possess it, because Inanna likes to possess things. This is her task. And she can't take the underworld with her or she'll stay in the underworld. The only thing you can take back from the underworld is the little piece of gold you got. from what you learned from it. Can't take back your suffering, your blame, your shame, blaming others. All has to be transformed and left in the underworld. So as she goes through the gates, at the first gate, I like to think that Bidu, she has to knock on the gate just like before. And Bidu, the gatekeeper, is going to say, you know, who are you now? What do you know now? You know, and she can't say what she said on the way down. I am Inanna, priestess of 7 temples, lover of Demutsi. You know, I'm a warrior. I'm a poet. She can't say all those things because all of those things are dissolved. She's very much in the present, almost like a rebirth. She's a baby, Inanna, you know, a baby being reborn. And she might not actually know who she is right now. Her answer might even be, I don't even really know. But if she did happen to say, I am, let's say we went to the other side. I have been abandoned. I was betrayed. I'm a victim of this situation. She has to process that at each of these gates and undo that and say, well, that's how I saw it. But that doesn't necessarily be exactly the truth of what happened to me or from me. And as she works through it, she has to, wash it back to the washing until it's purified, or burn it, wash it, until it turns to ash and is washed and it dissolves. Then she goes, well, then she can see the truth of what each of the moments in her underworld experience meant at a much deeper level. And so then she goes to the next gate, and Bidu will say, who are you now? And what has been transformed? What is transforming? Well, what do you believe now? What do you know now that you didn't know before? You can kind of, surmise the different kinds of questions that might be asked at these gates, which are different than the way down, because she's examining for death and rebirth. And by asking these questions at each of the gates before she can pass through, can you see that she is contemplating her experience rather than explaining it and repeating it the same way? She can't pass through the gate unless she has a new insight. Do you see that? And you know how when people have a traumatic or difficult, shocking experience, they can be in that blaming, shaming, victim story for decades, and it never changes. That means that they're still at the first or second gate. They're still in the underworld. So at each gate, if you're progressing, the story begins to go through an evolution of washing and burning and washing and burning, and going from black to white to gold until it becomes the new story that's pumping through your body as your blood. So it takes a while to go through those gates. You might say that just as she had to give something up or he took something from her as she was going down, let's go ahead and just imagine, again, this isn't written, so this is what we have to, and this is part of the power of myth, how the story from all different angles is transforming, which means you are transforming because we identify with our stories and our beliefs. We think we are them. We operate from them. So when Inanna comes up through the last gate, all these different versions of the story have been transformed into just having deeper meaning, self-love, really. And she sees how the story, what it taught her, rather than how she failed. So when Inanna comes up, one of the things that happens to her is that she's met by the Anunkai, I think they're called. They are the judges. We all go through the gate of judges when we come out of any difficult experience. But we judge ourselves. And I don't know if there's any way to come out of a complicated experience like this without going through the gate of judges. When Inanna comes back, the Anunkai say, well, you have to send somebody. Nobody ever leaves the underworld. And since you're leaving, you have to send somebody back in your place. So as she's leaving, Ninchaber is there, and they want to take Ninchaber, and Nana says, "Oh no, not Ninchaber. She was faithful to me, not her." And then somebody else is offered, and she goes, "No, not them, not them." And then she sees Demutzi, her shepherd husband, and he's sitting in her throne, and I think under an apple tree, or maybe just kind of hanging out with some women on stage, or kind of having a party. He doesn't even realize she's been gone or what she's been through. And she says, "Take him." And so he's taken, and there's a whole story about how he's taken, and he's taken to the underworld. Now, this is an interesting part of the story. With Demutzi being sent down, part of me thinks, okay, so when the first time she went down for a transformation, this is kind of a Jungian thought. Maybe some part of her feminine self, her feminine aspects of herself, went through a transformation. And then when she came back, she had to send something else down. I'm wondering if, like a next journey down, we balance ourselves by having an undeveloped masculine part of ourselves challenged and then developed. So because this is an agricultural myth, because that was the first culture that really developed agriculture. So they would be paying attention to the seasons, like things rise up in the spring, and you have to plant things. They go down into the underworld, and they rise up, and then you harvest them. So there's always this cycle of things going down, things coming up, right? Initially, in Sumerian writing in clay, that symbol meant Inanna, because she was queen of the harvest as well. Wherever you saw Inanna in art, when they started making her figure, a beautiful figure in art, they always had these reeds in this symbol next to her. So in all my paintings, I always have this symbol next to her. So there's something, that from the indigenous teachings, that we can't take something without giving something in return. We go out on a walk, and we think we can gather berries, or we can pick up sticks we like, or stones or shells, and just take them. And that's kind of how we treat the earth. We think we can take and take and take from the earth. But in the indigenous culture, you had to give something back. You had to ask the earth, "Can I take this from you?" And maybe leave some jewelry, or leave something that you've made with your own hands in return, because it takes time to make something. To ask for to take something, you have to give something. You don't take so much. It's more of a fair exchange. The footprint matches what you're taking from the earth. You see, there's something about that teaching that reminds me of when Inanna goes back. She has to send someone back down to take her place. And I'm thinking, when we're postpartum, or we've just gone through a great life transformation, we want to take whatever we've learned and just go on. Or we want to keep doing what we did before our transformation and not give anything up. Whatever we were doing or wearing, or our schedule, we want to just add the new thing, but not give anything up. And then that causes an imbalance in our life, because it can't really be done anyway. When we're going through a transformation, we're not the same person, and we have to give something up. Sacrifice is part of the rite of passage. Roberto Colasso says this is his writing. There was a time when everyone knew these stories. They introduced variations, or combined them, or split them up. And they etched them on tablets that eventually were buried under rubble and sand, thousands of them. But every now and then, there would be stories quite unlike any of these, and they lodged themselves in the mind. They came back at night, and it has never left me. And that passage really made sense to me, because until I first read the story of Inanna, and then read it again and again, my life was like that. I had heard stories about, midwifery, and stories about science, and stories about history. But to hear a myth of this richness, it lodged itself in me unconsciously. And then postpartum, it called to me and said, follow the steps of Inanna, and you'll get out of this postpartum chaos and depression I was in. It's like, couldn't find anybody to help me understand what had just happened to me. And in fact, that's exactly right. So this story lodged itself in my mind, in my body, in my heart. And even though I didn't know about mythology, it became my inner map for my life.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, feel free to share it. And if you haven't yet, please leave us a review. If you'd like to support the podcast monetarily, you can make a monthly donation at anchor.fm/inherimage. We hope you'll tune in next Sunday for another inspiring episode.